Breakfast show right here on Talk Radio. Stand by for 3 thrilling hours of news, views and lots of fun. Here's what's coming up. Despite a police ban, hundreds of angry women gathered last night to stage a vigil on murdered Sarah Everard, and it all went horribly wrong. The cops stand accused of heavy-handed treatment as screaming women were dragged away and 4 demonstrators were arrested. Was this the way to deal with women who, as they protested against the fear they say they suffer on a daily basis? Was it the right decision to outlaw this peaceful event in the first place because of the COVID crisis? Priti Patel is very concerned about the scenes that unfolded last night and is investigating, and there's a possibility we may hear from Police Commissioner Cressida Dick today. It was all tacitly, of course, endorsed by the Duchess of Cambridge as she laid flowers on London's Clapham Common near the point where Sarah first went missing. And what can be done, after all, to reclaim the streets and make them safe for women, especially at night? More of this throughout the show. Also on today's action-packed agenda, as the fallout from Meghan and Harry's incendiary Oprah Winfrey interview continues apace, Buckingham Palace has stepped up its probe into allegations that the couple were outrageous bullies during their time as working royals in Britain. We'll be talking to Mirror Royal editor Russell Myers about the latest developments there. Find out also how plans for a high-tech patrol boat to stop the migrants crossing the channel have sunk without trace, and hear why the First Lady of Downton Abbey is furious over Boris's agonisingly slow roadmap to freedom. And we'll pay a special tribute to the great Murray Walker, the voice of Formula One, who has died aged 97. Pop legend Carol Decker of Tapau fame will be with me throughout this morning, casting her eye over the big stories and the major issues of the day. A very busy 3 hours lie ahead, so let's get straight down to business.
Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk Radio.
In a minute, my presenter's friend for the day, Carol Decker, will join me. We'll have a quick look at what's in the papers and a general chat ahead of today's brilliant show. And Tom Clayton from TalkSport will be joining me later in the hour for the latest updates on the sporting scene, but especially to pay a tribute to someone I found out is actually his hero, Murray Walker, today. I mean, for millions of people of a certain age, I mean, Murray Walker passing from this mortal coil is a major event. That guy was a commentating legend and a voice known to millions. Clive James once said he spoke like a man whose trousers were on fire. In fact, he spoke like a man who had to raise his voice above the deafening din of racing cars and motorbikes for his entire life. He certainly shouted for a living. But what a guy. We'll be talking about him later. But before we get to all that, let's go straight to our first guest, Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs, Annabel Denham. Good morning, Annabel.
Good morning, Kevin.
Thank you so much for getting up so early on a Sunday, but it's a lovely day. The sun's shining, so things could be worse. But pretty bad scenes last night on Clapham Common. The Met Police have been criticised over their heavy-handed treatment of the women who were protesting. They did ban this demonstration, but as I said yesterday, it was inevitably a ban that would be defied by the women because feelings are running very, very high after the Sarah Everard tragedy. Do you think it was a good decision to ban this demonstration?
I think the problem is that the government and the police were between a rock and a hard place. We are still in the throes of the third lockdown. The restrictions are extremely strict. Let's not forget that schools only reopened this week, that you're just allowed to sit on a park bench and see one other person, visit somebody in a care home, whatever the loosening is, it's extremely limited. And so it would have been very difficult for the government to endorse this protest, understandable though the sentiment behind it was. So I think it was frustratingly inevitable, but I can't see that there was that much of an alternative.
I also think the police are running scared, or indeed Priti Patel and Cressida Dick were kind of running scared after the police took a very kind of hands-off approach to the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, which also defied the COVID laws. They didn't want to be seen to be soft-soaping illegal gatherers last night, but they didn't handle the situation well by common consent. The look of the pictures, there's one picture of a copper with his knee on the back of a woman on the ground. It's not a good look. It looks like they went over the top, do you think?
Yes, I mean, absolutely. And of course, what you've got are images of male police officers being extremely heavy handed with female protesters who are protesting about not being safe because of predatory men on the streets of London. So, it's hard not to see the irony there.
Yes. What do you think can be done? You see, it's all very well. We all sense that there's a problem here. We have to respect their feelings are running very, very, very high among women, and that is very, very understandable. But when they say something's got to be done, we've got to stop toxic masculinity. We all suffer harassment almost on a daily basis. I mean, what can be done? I mean, there's going to be pressure on Boris Johnson to do something about it. But what do you think could be done?
Well, I think it's extremely difficult. And what we don't want is to get into a situation of policy making by public opinion. Now, I know that the government is already taking steps to try and ensure that women are protected. Robert Buckman wrote an op-ed for the Daily Telegraph in which he rattled off a list of measures that the government is taking about the domestic abuse bill, about the police crime sentencing and courts bill, the rape review. So it is taking steps to try and ensure the safety of women. I mean, one thing I would say is, of course, that this crime is absolutely horrific. And I don't know a single woman who hasn't walked home late at night without holding her keys between her fingers in case somebody tries to attack her, who hasn't had a walk that's laced with fear at some point over the course of her life. But that said, I don't think that this is a symptom of a sexist and dangerous society. When something awful like this happens, it's so shocking because fortunately in our society, it is so rare. What I'm concerned about is just some knee-jerk response of the Jenny Jones ilk. This is the peer who called for a 6 p.m. curfew for men. We've now, of course, got people calling for a 6 p.m. curfew for police officers after their behaviour last night.
I must admit, when Jenny Jones made that absurd proposal, and don't forget it was for a while endorsed by Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford, who said he was seriously considering bringing that in Wales. I was thinking, well, what the hell? What's the difference? I mean, it's the lockdown. We can't go out anyway. But to be serious, that was an absurd proposal, and it doesn't help a very tricky situation. Those kind of suggestions are just crazy and mad and don't contribute anything to what ought to be a very important debate. Did you realise, Annabelle, I didn't know this, curb crawling? So it's a common practice, guys in their cars sort of coast just behind women, making them feel very uncomfortable, often yelling kind of lewd comments out of the car. Did you know that's not an offence?
Well, I didn't. Of course, it's very difficult to police behavior when it's not concrete. When does intimidation become something that should be criminalized, and when is intimidation, in the realms of thought policing? So I think, I didn't know that wasn't legal. I don't think that any man should set out to frighten women who are walking home, say, late at night. But I just think it's very, very difficult. I mean, the reason why we don't already have laws protecting women against these things is because it's very, very difficult to implement them without being too heavy-handed.
But I do think that I absolutely accept that it's one of those crimes. A curb crawling would be difficult to prove. But then again, rape is very difficult to prove. There are all sorts of important crimes out there that are notoriously hard to bring a conviction about. Rape is one of them. So that's at the heart of some of these complaints that are going on today.
We have a real problem with, at the moment in lockdown, that criminal cases are not just not going through the courts. Got a lot of allegations of rape that are not being tried or convicted because because of lockdown.
I just think that getting curb crawling onto the statute books as a legitimate offence that people can be arrested for and charged for and brought to justice for would be quite a good concrete move for the government to make. And no mealy words about, oh, well, it would be so difficult to convict people on this. Just put it on the statute book. Let's give it a go. Something needs to be done, and people need to see that something's being done. And if the government doesn't come up with a good way out of this situation, Boris is going to find himself under a lot of pressure. Can we move on? Talking of Boris, I mean, he has urged the public not to break the COVID rules by attending, if there are to be any more Sarah Everard vigils. He's urged the public not to do this. But as we've seen, I don't think people will be silenced on this issue. Can you give your opinion, please, on the Labour's approach? I want to ask you, but first of all, okay, let me ask you this. Boris Johnson, the nurses' pay issue. Now, we heard last week that it was 1% to nurses' pay for a pay rise. They're furious. They want 12.5%. And the government said, no, these are tough financial times. We can't give you any more. Now, it seems, upped the offer to 2.1%. I'm wondering what you think. Is that worth doing? Because for people who are asking for 12.5%, they're not going to go, oh, goody, we've got 2.1%. Shouldn't the government, which has a bad reputation for U-turning and changing its minds on this issue, dig its heels in and say, no, sorry, these are turbulent, tough times, 1%, that's it?
Yes, I agree. I think what the government might be best doing is sticking to the 1%. And let's not forget, this is for all NHS workers. That's nearly 1.5 million people. So Labour have done rather well in turning this into a discussion over nurses' pay. And what I would suggest would be some kind of bonus for
one-off payment, yeah.
Exactly, which
Agreed.
the government is said to be considering. But for the frontline workers who were specifically dealing with COVID, we can't have a bonus going across the 1.5-ish million people who work in the NHS. And I mean, what I would say about this nurses' pay furore is that there are many people in the public and the private sector who over the course of the pandemic have displayed acts of heroism, who have really put their lives at risk to continue working. So that could be lorry drivers, delivery men, postal workers, supermarket shelf stackers, the police. And we simply are not in a financial position to be giving all of those people pay rises, unfortunately. And let's not forget that when the furlough scheme does unwind, we are going to see hundreds of thousands of people losing their jobs, hundreds of thousands of people unemployed.
I think millions, Annabelle, no doubt about it.
Exactly, quite possibly. But there are hundreds of thousands, being kept in artificial employment at the moment on the furlough scheme. And I think we just need to remember that, unfortunately, our public finances are a train wreck. We have borrowed hundreds of billions of pounds to pay for COVID. And in the medium term, at least, we need to start thinking about how we are going to try to begin balancing the books.
I'll tell you what worries me about the nurses' pay. Now, we all admire the frontline medical workers who've bravely fought COVID for the past terrible year. I mean, they are heroes. However, I do not like this kind of grading of jobs, that somehow or other, the fact that they're nurses, their jobs are so much more important than someone who works in McDonald's. You may want to think that. However, we all have our crosses to bear. We all have to get our jobs, and the idea that, oh, you've got to pay health workers, never mind the people who work in McDonald's or who work in offices. I think that's a rather sort of pernicious route to go down, this sort of divisive approach to the quality of people's jobs, and therefore saying, well, most people don't deserve a pay rise, but of course nurses do.
Yes, I mean, I think that's very fair. Undoubtedly, we all saw the images of COVID, when it first struck and ravaged hospitals across the UK, and the situations that frontline staff were having to work with were extremely grim. And like you say, they did display acts of heroism, but so too did a number of other workers. And many people have had to continue working throughout this crisis. And like I say, they're not demanding a 12.5% pay rise at a time when we've suffered the deepest recession in 300 years.
Yeah, it doesn't, of course, help, and this is what makes the nurses angry, that the government in other areas is splashing the cash like a drunken sailor. But that's a problem that Boris is going to have to deal with coming forward. I wonder if he will buckle and give them this 2.1%. I suspect he will. He's getting a real reputation for changing his mind and doing U-turns. It makes him look weak. Annabelle, thank you so much for your time this morning. Have a lovely Sunday. There's a lot of it ahead. It's Annabelle Denham, the Director of Communications at the Institute of Economic Affairs. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
Vaccines are saving lives in the UK right now.
Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
In a little while, we'll be talking to Norman Brennan, retired London police officer, a long-term detective, about how the police go about a murder investigation. What do they do? What are the technicalities of a probe into the ultimate crime, murder? So Norman dealt with murders throughout his distinguished career, and he'll be telling us exactly how you tackle a major investigation into a murder. And also, of course, Tom Clayton will be joining us for all the sport, and a tribute to Murray Walker, and not forgetting boxer marvellous Marvin Hagler, who has died aged, I think, 66. That's a bit of a shocker as well. So sad day today on the sporting front. But before we get to all that, it's time to introduce my presenter's friend, pop legend from Tapau, Carol Decker. Good morning, Carol.
Morning, Kevin. How are you?
I'm very, very well. Thanks very much for getting up so early on a lovely...
On Mother's Day as well.
On Mother's Day, yeah.
Having my breakfast in bed.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I'm ruining your Mother's Day already. My mum's no longer with us, so I kind of forget this kind of thing. Should take the opportunity to send all our best wishes to all the mums out there. You're very special people. And you are too, Carol. So let's talk about last night. What did you make of the Clapham Vigil, the women who gathered, hundreds of them gathered? Now, this was a banned demonstration because of the COVID crisis. It broke the kind of rules over gathering. But we kind of knew they'd turn up anyway. The police didn't seem to be all that well prepared for how to handle this situation. I don't think they went about their duty very well. Do you?
No, and obviously the demonstration technically wasn't meant to go ahead and had been cancelled by Reclaim These Streets, who had officially tried to organise it. But you knew people were going to feel compelled to go there as a show of solidarity. But when it's so frustrating that the police force, took the knee with the BLM and danced with Extinction Rebellion, and this is the time they choose to get forceful when it's women coming together.
I think that's why they did it, because they were so worried about another backlash about them going easy on demonstrators. So they went easy on Black Lives Matter. They went easy on Extinction Rebellion when neither of those organisations should have been out on the streets demonstrating because of the COVID crisis. And I think they were terrified of not doing that again, because if they did it again, it would be a bad look. However, I think they've overcompensated and they've ended up with a bad look anyway.
Absolutely, because forceful policing is never a good optic, is it? No. But, obviously, what concerned me was as it turned into a furore and you saw that the women being dragged off, and particularly that red-headed woman with, the police on top of her practically, is that Sarah Everard seems to be getting lost in all this furore. It's become... it's escalated into its own thing about what people are allowed to do and how the police police it, and poor Sarah's dead and her family are in bits. And it reminded me very, very sadly, do you remember Rachel Nickel, who was stabbed to death on Wimbledon?
Yes, I do. Yes.
It echoes of that.
And
there are nutters out there. There are nutters and psychopaths out there, and I feel uncomfortable with it escalating into this toxic masculinity argument. As a woman, of course, I've had my fair share of some extremely unwarranted behaviour from oafs, and we had a terrible thing happen in my family, which I won't go into now. So I've seen the worst of men, but I love my men, and I don't like it spiraling out of control. You know, I've got a son, I've got a husband, I've got a brother, and I just think Sarah's getting lost in all of this.
I do agree with you. We all have the utmost sympathy for all women who feel very strongly that they're living in an environment where they are scared to go out on the streets at night. That is not a good thing, and they're quite right to protest about it. I'm not saying necessarily to break the laws, but in spirit to protest about this toxic atmosphere that seems to be proliferating on our streets. So all due sympathy for them. But I do fear, as you're suggesting there, Carol, that certain kind of extreme man haters have got hold of this issue and are turning it into a kind of anti-man demo. Hence, we had Baroness Jenny Jones suggesting that all men should be curfewed after 6 p.m. and Mark Drakeford, the Welsh First Minister, endorsing that fairly soon afterwards. He's since distanced himself from it. She's saying, oh, she was just trying to make a point. But that's the kind of sentiment that worries me, that it's been hijacked by man haters.
Hijacked. Yeah, that's the word. And all good causes will get hijacked. They all do, don't they? They come from a good place and they get hijacked by activists or people determined to get their own agenda across. And then the core of the matter seems to disappear. So let's focus on Sarah. Let's focus on her family.
Yeah, there's some calls today that due to this shambles down on Clapham Common last night. And by the way, Carol, let's not forget, this kind of event was sort of tacitly endorsed by the Duchess of Cambridge, who arrived with a bouquet of flowers to put down on the kind of unofficial memorial for Sarah Everard. So, you know, you could really, it's very hard to get very blameful about the women who gathered when a member of the royal family basically joined in. So that's a difficult situation. So
it is. But my mind's all over the place with this.
Mine too. Yeah, mine too.
Because of the whole Meghan, Harry, and the fallout from the interview and the accusations going back and forth. Was Kate saying to Meghan, okay, you can sit there in your great big mansion in Malibu, wafting on beside the swimming pool to Oprah. I'm down on the ground with the people, really turning up when something matters. Was that her message?
Yeah. Now, could we, just before you go for now, Carol, you will be joining me obviously throughout the 3 hours, and we'll do a newspaper review later on. Buckingham Palace, on the Meghan and Harry front, have launched an official inquiry and brought in independent investigators to the allegations that Harry and Meghan were, and I quote, outrageous bullies while they were working royals here in Britain. Now, this seems to be the palace stepping up what you might call a kind of fight back against Harry and Meghan. We know that William is absolutely furious with Harry, and the palace now stands accused of racism. I think the Queen has to have an official investigation into that as well. It's all getting very murky, isn't it?
It is. Well, I'll just express my ignorance to start with. I don't know what the firm, the palace's official business standing is, but they're not just a family. So I think if they're an organisation, let's call them an organisation, somebody can maybe correct me on where they stand business-wise. They have to investigate both. They must investigate any accusations of racism, and bullying must also be looked into. And I think they're sort of lobbing hand grenades at each other at the moment. But these are things that any business would have to look into if various staff members made the complaints and accusations. So they have to do it, I guess. Yeah,
just before you go, Carol, I've made it very clear that my view is that the Queen's statement, or the Palace's statement the other day about the racism charges, and that is, of course, that Meghan and Harry say that a member of the royal family expressed concern about what colour her unborn child would be. There's nothing racist about speculating on the colour of a baby. We're going to be talking to a dad of a mixed-race family later on, who said it was great fun, the guessing games. He's got, I think, 4 kids, and they're all different colours.
He placed bets. He said it, they used to place bets on it.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's so he's coming on the show later on and said it was great fun. So there's nothing inherently racist about this. But if you say, "Oh my God, I hope that baby doesn't come out too brown," of course that is racist, and that's what Meghan and Harry are saying. I think the Queen saying we'll look at this privately, a private matter, that's not good enough. Just as they have to rather officially investigate the bullying allegations, they've got to officially investigate the racism allegations as well. The royal family is a public institution, and if there's a racist in that family, we have a right to know.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. They've got to investigate both. And I have mixed race cousins, and they are the children of my closest cousin. She's practically like a sister to me. We grew up together, and it would never have occurred to me. And I've got an evil sense of humour, and I would never.
I know.
What shade do you think it's going to be, Janet? You know, I just wouldn't. It wouldn't have occurred to me. So on any level, it's odd, but I can see, let's just say, potentially an older generation making a clumsy inquiry. I can see that as a potential thing. I wouldn't like to think anybody went, "Oh dear, I do hope they're not going to be too dark. That's not going to look good in the photographs."
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I mean, or did it happen at all? I mean, it needs a proper investigation. I mean, it's certainly okay, I think, just about to question the veracity of some of the things that Meghan and Harry said, because their stories aren't consistent. And it may be that an investigation into the racism allegations may prove it never happened. You never know. But either way, we need to know the truth, and we need to know who they're pointing the fingers at. So it's a developing and worsening situation, I think. Grenades have been lobbed across the Atlantic, and they're now exploding. Actually, and our royal family are fighting back. So it's a really kind of toxic situation. Thank you for now, Carol. You'll be back with me, as I say, throughout the show to comment and opine on the big stories and the issues of the day. Carol Decker there, T'Pau singer, pop legend, musician, and woman of the world, I think it's fair to say. She'll be with me throughout the show. In a little while, sport with Tom Clayton. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Late Nights with Christo
on Talk Radio.
Do you look at them now and think, actually, I feel a little bit sorry for them?
Keep connected with round-the-clock news, comprehensive comment and expert analysis.
All of them are not worth the oxygen they breathe.
Late Nights with Christo.
Weeknights from 10 on Talk Radio.
Evenings with James Whale
on Talk Radio.
Keep connected with round-the-clock news, essential information and expert insight.
If you are seeking asylum, you seek asylum in the country that is closest to you, that isn't going to abuse you, as I understand it.
Cutting through the confusion with everything you need to stay safe, informed and entertained.
Just because somebody's an MP doesn't mean they always get it right.
Evenings with James Whale.
Monday to Thursday evenings from 7
on Talk Radio. Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk Radio.
In a little while, the anatomy of a police murder investigation. Norman Brennan, former London police detective, will be joining us to tell us how the cops go about a massive murder investigation. But first, it's time for the sport with Tom Clayton from Talk Sport. Morning, Tom.
Morning, Kevin. How are we doing?
Before we start, let's just have a listen to this.
Wins looks through a completely clean windscreen, and that's the big advantage, of course, of being in front. And that's the big disadvantage of getting your line wrong.
First of all, will you carefully and slowly take your hat off? You've got an enormous bump on your head. Can you let them see it?
I don't know where there you go.
Right up there. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hello! Oh! Off! It's Tarquini! And wins the Japanese Grand Prix. And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
That's, of course, the legendary Murray Walker, who sadly died died at age 97. He was the voice of Formula One, one of the great voices of sport. That lump in his throat that he got at the end there, that was him crying when Damon Hill won the Japanese Grand Prix. He was emotionally involved in everything he commentated on. Clive James once said he spoke like a man whose trousers were on fire. In fact, Tom, he spoke like a man who had to spend his entire life shouting above the din of racing cars.
Yeah, he did, and to be honest, I'm not actually complaining too much about that. You know, his
he was great. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, the iconic shout and it's happened already at the Japanese Grand Prix between Senna and Prost, and all of the things that happened between Senna and Prost on his watch and his commentary with James Hunt. You know, the Japanese Grand Prix with Damon Hill winning, like we say, he won the World Championship that day in 1996. It was just a remarkable time, and what a remarkable man.
Yes, he was. And it was, I think, his emotional involvement in the sport that he loved that made him so special. As I say, he had that booming voice that we listened to. I think it must have been 40, 50 years that guy was on the telly. But also, as we just saw with him crying, he had this deep personal involvement in the sport. He loved the sport. He loved the drivers. He loved the whole thing.
He did, and we talk about F1 fanatics these days, and everyone kind of knows something. Everyone knows who Lewis Hamilton is. People could probably point out Jenson Button in a lineup, for example. Not that he's racing for a few years, but Murray Walker was the kind of man who he could walk into the paddock and he would know everyone. He would know everything that's going on. There would be very little that actually escaped any of his knowledge at all. He was just this encyclopedia about the sport. Even up until the last couple of years of his life, he still knew so much about the sport that he loved, that many of us love. I, for one, am a huge fan of Formula One, and one of the reasons was because I remember in my very early years listening to Murray Walker commentate on the Grand Prix, and to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I'm in broadcasting. He is just so knowledgeable. He was so passionate about the sport, and what a lot of sport is lacking is passion like that, and Formula One will miss that in the future.
Yes, what a voice, what a guy. Just before we get on to today's sport, another sad event, the death of marvellous Marvin Hagler, the boxing champion. A few words on him?
Yeah, again, another, we weren't...
Only 66 or something?
66, yeah. It shows the dangers. We don't know what it was from, but, bear in mind he was in boxing in the 1970s and 1980s. Won 62 fights out of a 67 career from 73 to 87, including, he lost that very sort of high-profile match against Sugar Ray Leonard, which he didn't even want to fight in the first place. But again, another real mainstay in boxing, someone who, maybe the younger generation won't have heard of, because the younger generation hears of Mike Tice and they hear of Muhammad Ali, but Marvellous Marvin Hagler is just as important in the same way.
There was a while, for a while, he was a colossus. He was the big name in boxing. So it's surprising the way people get lost in the mists of history. But he was huge. So quite an event, end of an era, two ends of an era, I suppose. Let's get on to the sport of the day. Don't often get to say this. England won in the rugby.
I know. It's lovely, isn't it? They beat Italy a few weeks ago, we were expecting. But yesterday was... And I can say this with 100% sincerity, that was one of the most entertaining test matches of rugby I've seen in a long time. Mm-hmm. And that will go down as one of the great Six Nations matches at Twickenham. It was brilliant. England against France. France scored after 68 seconds. And then England scored about 5 minutes later. And we thought, is it going to be one of those days where they run up a cricket score against each other? And it looked like that for a while. But then defensive organisation came into it. And it created some fantastic, really well-crafted attacks that was actually very entertaining to watch. And, from an England's perspective, I'm very happy that England won. But from a rugby supporter's perspective, I'm just happy I watched that match. It was brilliant.
Game, yeah. Great game. And Wales, we don't have to dwell on this. They routed Italy, obviously.
Yeah, 48-7, and sets them up for the Grand Slam next week if they can beat France.
Okay. I suppose we better go on to yesterday's football. Significant results in terms of the relegation battle. Fulham 0. Oh, God. Man City 3.
Yeah, you'll be pleased to know it wasn't the only significant game in the relegation battle. West Brom, I think, have pretty much counted themselves out of a comeback. I think we know that Sheffield United, it will be a miracle for them to stay up. Similarly with West Brom now, they lost 1-0 to Crystal Palace, who, to be honest, Crystal Palace have dug themselves out of a bit of a hole with that result. You know, they weren't doing great and they were kind of slipping towards that battle, but they've actually come out of it quite nicely and they will feel a little bit more comfortable. But no, Fulham, I think the first half was very much an even contest, and I thought Fulham played very, very well. But then Manchester City's fitness, their talent, their ability, the fact that we know that they're probably going to be champions, you know, gave them three goals pretty clearly. And Sergio Aguero scored his first for 14 months. And it was just one of those days where Manchester City won out, and that was it.
Well, we were expecting to lose anyway. I wish we could have lost with a little more style. I was texting with a friend of mine. When we were 3-0 down, we were just begging that was the end of it, because it didn't look like it was going to be. It could have been worse, I suppose. Today's fixtures, we've got the Arsenal-Tottenham derby, London derby, of course. What's the significant stuff?
So the significant stuff is, in the past, that has been very much, in the past few years, that's been a battle for who's going to finish third and fourth or second in the Premier League. At the moment, it's two teams that might miss out on European football next year, which is remarkable considering the size of these two clubs. Arsenal, I think, need the win more than Tottenham, because Arsenal, if they do lose, they will... I think that's them almost dead and buried for European football outside of winning the Europa League. So it's kind of a crucial day for Arsenal, but then Tottenham as well. They kind of have to, Tottenham have to bring something to the table. In the last few games, they've not really brought an awful lot to the table. It's been classic Mourinho: score one goal and sit back and hope Harry Kane and Son Heung-min can do some damage up front. So I think it's a very significant game. I think Arsenal have a very good record in home matches in the North London derby. So I don't know. I think it's going to be close, but I think I would probably actually give the edge just to Arsenal.
Other interesting games. Brighton, of course, if they lose to Southampton today at Southampton, that could really plunge them into the relegation race. Fingers crossed on that one.
They're very much in there at the moment. They're only out of the relegation zone on goal difference.
But that'll really put them in amongst the pigeons. Just, I suppose, at the other end of the table, Man United, West Ham, that we're talking about top four Europe there, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd be surprised now if West Ham do make the top four. I think the four teams above them are probably the four strongest teams in the league. But a result today at Old Trafford at 7:15 tonight, that would be a huge coup for West Ham. They would absolutely be deserving of chasing that top four, and they're not far off. So I don't see why we can't talk about it like that. But I think ultimately this is Manchester United's game to lose. They are in a very comfortable position, although they are looking over the shoulders at Leicester and Chelsea chasing their second place. I will be even more shocked if Manchester United can claw back the title race and win the league, because
they're going to do that.
Well, at the start of the day, they're 17 points behind Manchester City with how many games? 9 games left.
I think we'd give that one to City. What's on TalkSport today?
On TalkSport today, well, more cricket. Another England side that we're shocked has been winning. Their T20 side, they take on India in the second international T20. That is from 12:30 over on TalkSport 2.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. A nice tribute to Murray Walker as well there. That's Tom Clayton from TalkSport with all the latest talk news, sport news, and, as I say, a tribute to Murray Walker and Marvellous Marvin Hagler, two sad deaths in the world of sport. Thank you very much, Tom. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
After the 8 o'clock news, Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform UK party, will be joining me. We're going to discuss the migrants. They're still coming across the channel in record numbers. This is a quiet story that is slipping beneath the radar, but it is going on now. And we're going to talk about a patrol ship that was supposed to be brought in to rather stop this constant avalanche of people coming here. And those plans for that boat have been axed. We'll find out why from Richard, and also find out life without Nigel Farage, who's quit frontline politics. He was, of course, the former leader of the party. So we'll talk to Richard about all that after the news. But first, let's go straight over to retired London police detective and, of course, director of the Law and Order Foundation, friend of the show, Norman Brennan. Good morning, Norman.
Yeah, good morning, Kevin.
Now, we've got to keep this very I want to just talk generally. I don't want to talk specifics. But you have handled many a murder investigation. How do you go about investigating a murder? A body is found, and we often hear hundreds of officers get involved in these investigations. How does it happen? How do you go about it?
Well, look, take the Metropolitan Police, for example. As soon as a murder occurs, a detective chief inspector will be in place. There will be 2 or 3 detective inspectors and up to 5 detective sergeants, and then probably around 30 detective constables. They will then be backed up by scenes of crimes officers, forensics. There will be a massive team put together. So straight away, what they do is they do what is commonly known as the ordinary. They look at the circumstances. They look for CCTV. If it's a female, for example, they will look for a partner, an ex-partner. They will speak to family. They will speak to friends. That is what is commonly known as the ordinary. When a murder occurs, it's called the golden hour. And the golden hour is when we try to get the best possible evidence and start for a murder investigation. Because not all murders, as you rightly know, are cleared up within 24 hours.
What is Norman? What is the golden hour? That's presumably the evidence that you find literally in the first 60 minutes of the investigation. You're saying that that's very valuable. What is the sort of stuff that you can discover in that golden hour?
Well, forensics are very important. House-to-house inquiries, CCT information, and obviously any witnesses. As soon as we put the appeal out, there's cameras in vehicles now, there's cameras outside shops. So the evidence they gather at the beginning is the best possible evidence. It's evidence that we later don't lose. Then what you look at doing is called the extraordinary. If we don't find out that we have any suspects very early, then of course the investigation pans out further. You look at CCTV on buses. You pan out the inquiries where you put it out to other forces. You put out the circumstances on a Holmes system, which is a now massive computerized system. Immediately, what you do is you put out to other forces and other police stations what the circumstances are, and if they've got any suspects. For example, in sex attacks, what we would do, we will see what the circumstances were. That will be put onto the system, and immediately we'll probably get 10, 20 or even 50 suspects. Then we start getting a team eliminating them. It's a massive project. And outside London, what often happens is 2 or 3 forces pull their resources together like the Met can do better than many others. And they will have, for example, Hertfordshire, Cambridgeshire and Bedfordshire will pull their resources so they too can get systems together like the Met do.
What's the hardest thing about a murder investigation, Norman?
I think it's dealing with the family. That is the hardest point. Foremost, you're going to have to break the news to a family that they never want to hear and you never want to give.
What a terrible thing that must be to do.
Without a doubt it is. And then, of course, the other frustrating thing, certainly with gun crime and knife crime in London, when it's gang-related, for example, nobody wants to talk to the police. Others are fearful of talking to the police. We may know who the main suspect or suspects are, but we cannot arrest those unless we have the information. We can arrest them on suspicion, of course, which is what we often do. But when the public think, my goodness, the police have arrested 5 people for murder, and they bailed them. My God, why aren't they charging them? It's because we have some evidence, and often it's quite little. We hope to gain that through interviews. But if we haven't got sufficient evidence to charge, they are released back into society. It's not what we want, but it's what we have to do.
Yeah, you've got to stick to the law. Thank you for this insight into how you go about a murder investigation, Norman. On a slightly different issue, last night we saw this female vigil, the vigil of the angry women on Clapham Common. That was a that defied a police ban because of the COVID crisis shouldn't gather and potentially spread the virus. But let's park that. I don't think the police handle that situation very well. It seems to be yet another problem that Cressida Dick, the chief of the Met, finds herself right in the middle of. It seems never a day goes by without her being involved in some sort of problem. There are increasing calls for her to go. Do you think that Cressida Dick should resign?
No, not after last night. I mean, the thing is, Kevin, when you see social media comments, when you see short clips of video, it doesn't tell you the whole story. Now, what I would say to people like Priti Patel and the Mayor of London and the head of the Liberal Democrats before any start asking for resignations is this. The Metropolitan Police did not want to be there. The organisers were told by a High Court judge that this is an illegal gathering. So what the Met did is they put a few female officers there to interact with any of the people that turned up, telling them, look, please go home, put your flowers down. You can spend a minute here, light a candle, that's fine. Then suddenly hundreds turned up. Then more officers were asked to come because it became a public order situation. The Met had to look after them. Then thousands turned up. And then it got to a situation, and I've seen what officers have read and said, is that the police told everybody, please go home. And in every demonstration now, there are elements that turn up to cause trouble. There were people with placards, all coppers have no fathers. Even the some of the officers were said, some of the demonstrators said, we hoped it was you and not Sarah. And it got to a point where police cars were being damaged. They had to deal with it.
Totally. It was a very fraught situation. Thank you so much for your comments and getting up on a Sunday morning, Norman. Speak to you again very soon. Norman Brennan, their retired police officer, director of the Law and Order Foundation. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Across the UK, online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
That link is now breaking thanks to the vaccination programme.
Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
Into the second hour. It is 8:03. That's one of my breakfast show time checks that I'm having to get used to. In a little while, we'll be talking to the royal editor of The Mirror, Russell Myers, about the latest developments in the Harry and Meghan affair. Just seems to keep on getting worse. And Greg Swenson, our Republican overseas friends, will be joining us to talk about what's happening across the pond. And today, he'll know all about that because he is across the pond. He'll be coming to us directly from Florida. And at the end of the hour, we'll talk to Maggie Oliver, former detective who helped expose the Rochdale sex paedophile ring. She's going to talk to us about the problem of toxic men in society. She knows all about how badly some men do treat women. She's an expert in that area. But first, let's go straight over to the leader of the Reform UK Party, Richard Tice. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning, Kevin. You must have upset your bosses to have been given the Sunday morning breakfast slot. What's going on?
Well, they keep telling me it's a promotion, but it doesn't feel like it when I'm getting up at 4 a.m, I'll tell you. But this is the big time, mate. It's breakfast, and that's why you're on the show, to give it a real lift.
We should talk first of all, Kevin, about the.
Well, I'm going to go straight to that. We have other issues to discuss in a minute, but I think the issue of the day is what happened last night on Clapham Common. My feeling, tell me what you think. I think they should have thought a little longer and harder about whether or not this vigil should have been banned. I mean, we are in this road to freedom. We're approaching the moment where pubs can be open. We are gradually going back to normal. Surely a peaceful vigil with social distancing could have been allowed, and that might have diffused what turned into a rather tense situation last night.
Well, let's be very clear what's happened here, Kevin. This is an absolute failure of leadership at the top of the Met. You had this group Reclaim the Streets. They were forced to go to court on Friday. The judge ruled that actually, it would be lawful to hold a vigil as a sort of a dignified vigil at the bandstand. and the Met refused to properly engage with the group. So the group, unfortunately, basically, they decided they had to cancel their plans. But isn't it interesting? You look in other cities across the UK, peaceful, socially distanced, masked vigils took place without any issue at all. But here in the centre of London, because of the Met Police's utter failure, we've got just desperately sad, shocking scenes. And I just think it's a complete failure of leadership. There was no need for the police to be there in that way. It could have been, perfectly sensibly handled. And yeah, it's a failure of leadership. I've called for Cressida Dick to resign on the matter. I know that Lawrence Fox, who's running for Mayor of London, is going to call for Cressida Dick. I think actually, Kevin, this could be the defining issue, her leadership of the Met, of the mayoral election. I suspect that actually you may find someone like Lawrence Fox, he might ask Sadiq Khan and Sean Bailey, the Labour and the Conservative candidates, whether they support her continued leadership of the Met or whether they will fire her. Because actually that then really becomes a real, this is not the first time.
Yeah, she seems to lurch from one crisis to the next. And I think what happened last night, and again, this is testament to the fact that the police don't seem to be able to adopt any kind of consistent policy, is I think she was terrified that the police might be accused of going soft on illegal demonstrations, like they did to Black Lives Matter, like they did to Extinction Rebellion. They didn't want to do that again, and of course they haven't done a compromise. They've gone way over the top. They've overcompensated, and those scenes last night were a very, very bad look.
It was terrible. The whole point of leadership is you show good judgment, sound judgment. But time after time, whether it's with Extinction Rebellion, whether it's with the Black Lives Matter protests, whether it was last night, the police continually get it wrong. And Londoners deserve better. We want to have confidence in our police that they're going to keep the streets safe and that they're going to sensibly, essentially watch over and supervise lawful protest. And as I repeat, the judge said that actually this could go ahead.
Yeah, and the police, of course, didn't. But still no word, of course, from the London mayor on what happened last night. The only thing he said was before the demonstration was the really helpful interjection that whilst he was very worried about the COVID crisis, he did understand why the women were so upset and why they wanted to demonstrate. Didn't come down, sat right on the fence, didn't say anything at all, doesn't seem to bear any responsibility for the fact it is the streets of his city that women feel so unsafe on.
He really is. I mean, he is Mr. Teflon, is Sadiq, isn't it? And it's just not good enough. I think there will be a crisis of confidence amongst London women and London men as well in the leadership of the Met. And frankly, if she won't resign, Sadiq Khan should fire her. And if he won't fire her, then it may be that Londoners fire him in May.
I have the utmost sympathy for the women who protested last night and for women in general. There's clearly a problem on our streets. There is a problem with predatory men. But what I do worry about is that these demonstrations, these high feelings, these understandable strong feelings are being hijacked by a small group of extreme man-haters, as demonstrated with Baroness Jenny Jones's absurd suggestion that all men should be locked in their houses after 6 p.m. to make women seem safe on the streets. That's the problem here, that the extremists are hijacking a situation. And in all this, we seem to have forgotten almost that a poor young woman died a horrible death.
Yeah, well, let's be absolutely clear. No one's forgotten that at all. We all continue to be absolutely horrified. And I mean, forget these ridiculous calls about, male curfews at 6 p.m. I mean, it's just ludicrous. No, it's just about the application of common sense amongst our leaders. And of course, it's also common sense, isn't it? If we unlocked, given now that, COVID mercifully has once again disappeared, from our cities, it's virtually gone. The number of cases is absolutely tiny. That actually, of course, what we should be doing is unlocking London and unlocking the rest of the UK. And once you unlock, guess what? You've got more people on the streets. It's then safer to walk those very streets, either at day or at night. It's another good reason, frankly, to unlock the country, and we need to get going. And when you've got more people walking the streets and Clapham Common, it is safer. This is all just another example of the tragic collateral damage from lockdown, and we've got to show some common sense, and we've got to move forward.
I know you share my scepticism about the efficacy of lockdowns. Now, we know that if you do lockdown, of course, you stop the spread of the virus, at least on a temporary basis. Now, Boris Johnson changed the goalpost a couple of weeks ago when he unfolded his roadmap to freedom by saying that when we get to June the 21st, God, that's a long way off, isn't it? Why is this so long? That what we're going to have to do is not celebrate the death of the virus, our victory over the virus, but we're going to have to get used to living with the virus. And what that means is when we do come out of lockdown, the cases will go up, deaths will go up. Do you fear on past performance that Boris and the gang, when they see those statistics rising, they will buckle and lock us down again? Because I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, I'm desperately worried about this. I put the prospect of a fourth national lockdown at around about 30%, Kevin. I think that there are clearly leaders who think this is the right thing to do. We at Reform UK are going to be putting forward a very clear plan, but it's centred around, it's absurd the government have once again, albeit they have this time admitted it rather than doing it quietly, once again they've now shut the Nightingale hospitals. It's completely the wrong thing to do. They should be kept on standby. The retired medics, doctors and nurses should be put on a retainer. They should be giving a bit of training, and they should be ready so that in the unlikely event, but we have to accept as possible, that there is a surge in a virus, whether it's flu, which of course has disappeared this winter but may come back with a vengeance next winter, or whether it's a variant of COVID, that the NHS needs the contingency ready. We can easily do it. We know what now needs to be done. So let's prepare. Let's have that contingency plan in place so that actually the government can guarantee there will not be any need for a lockdown, because you've got the 15,000 or so Nightingale beds ready and there, and you've got the extra staff, the retired medics and nurses available to come and help. That's leadership, and it's just sadly lacking.
I think also the government should spend some time on trying to recalibrate the public mindset, because the public have been persuaded that lockdowns are successful, that they do beat the virus. Well, yes, they quell the virus, they suppress the virus, but when you come out of lockdown, the virus returns, possibly, hopefully not in such great strength as before, but it will return, the deaths will go up, and we've got to get used to this and stop believing that lockdowns will defeat and exterminate the virus. There's a problem there, isn't there? This perception that lockdowns are the brilliant panacea that will beat the virus. They don't.
The international evidence is crystal clear that lockdowns do not prevent mortality. It is as simple as that. You look at different states across the US, and you've got states like Florida, like Texas, that had soft restrictions that have got less deaths than states like Massachusetts, California, New York, who had very harsh lockdowns. And there are plenty of other examples. All the lockdowns do is suppress the virus. And tragically, what happened this time with the tiers and the lockdown in November is that what the government did, they pushed the virus back into the most extreme part of the year, i.e. January, when flu is always at its worst. Sod's law was that we got the variants as well. And sadly, we see the consequences. So, lockdowns do not prevent mortalities. The collateral damage in terms of non-COVID health issues for other patients is massive. The mental health issues, school children are having a torrid time wearing masks. I'm hearing just in the last week, we're spending over £30 million a day, Kevin, on testing now, as we test 1.5 million tests. That's £150 million a week on testing. And we're getting 5,000 to 6,000 cases, which is lower than the false positive rate you would get from all those tests. It's utter lunacy, and it's got to stop.
Yes, and don't forget the vaccine does seem to be working. So when Boris starts comparing the situation today with the situation in the summer when we came out of lockdown and cases went back up, I think it's ludicrous because then we didn't have the vaccine. Now we've got the vaccine. The two situations are not comparable. Time is against us, Richard. I want to talk to you slightly about the migrants who do keep crossing in record numbers. It's the story that's gone under the radar. But can I conflate that with your thoughts on Nigel Farage's decision to quit frontline politics and therefore I suspect mostly leave the running of the Reform UK party to yourself and your new deputy friend of mine, Dr. David Bull. What do you feel about life without Nigel, and what do you feel, I'm sure he still feels very strongly, that we need to flag up the fact that the migrants are still crossing the channel in record numbers? This is a situation that has not been dealt with.
Correct. Well, you can rest assured that Nigel is now honorary president of Reform UK. He will continue to give his wisdom, counsel, and experience, which we will be very grateful for. And everybody knows, Nigel feels passionately about this. Reform UK feels passionately about this. It's such an important issue. But Nigel's not going to stop. That is for sure. He's going to campaign on specific issues, of which, of course, this is one. And as you say, the numbers have gone up this year. No surprise there. And again, it comes back to this issue of leadership. This time it's leadership by ministers and by the Home Secretary and the leadership of the Border Force. You and I have spoken on this before. We're sending tens of millions of pounds to France to help on this issue. And it seems to me that they're banking it and clearly not doing enough with it because the numbers are going up. And there's only one way to deal with this, and that is you have to make it absolutely clear that they are coming over, anybody coming over the English Channel, they're coming over illegally, and there is no prospect of any of them being given asylum. Zero, absolutely zero. Once people realise that, and they realise that, if we have a sufficient number of border vessels that are basically patrolling the Channel, very close to the French shores, it's about a 40-mile range that need patrolling, then actually people will be picked up and they will be taken straight back to the beach or to the port of Dunkirk or Calais, and therefore they will be picked up. And yes, the smugglers, the vile people who carry on with this trade, they would be arrested and given very long sentences. That's the only way of dealing with it, but it requires committed leadership. And I'm afraid that once again is just not present in, we hear nice words from the ministers and from the Home Secretary, but no action, Kevin. And at Reform UK, we believe in action, not waffle.
Excellent. You're quite right, Richard. There are leadership issues all over the place in Britain at the moment, but there's no leadership issues in the Reform UK party because you're the leader. Always good to talk to you, Richard. Thank you so much for your time on a Sunday morning. Richard Tice there, as I say, the esteemed leader of the Reform UK party, a very successful businessman too. A man who talks a lot of sense, if you ask me. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
What we need is stimulus packages and incentives to bounce out of this situation.
Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
In a little while, we'll be talking to our friend Greg Swenson, who's normally based here in London. He's, of course, an American from the Republican Overseas Organisation. But today he'll be coming to us from sunny Florida, FLA. So we'll be talking to Greg about the scene over there. I want to ask him about this sort of growing problem of Americans somehow, because of Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah Winfrey, believing that Britain's some kind of medieval racist hellhole. It really is getting a bit out of hand. So Greg, who obviously lives here in London and is an American, will have both sides of that story. It'd be interesting to talk to him about that and to find out what the scene is like over there right now. But first, of course, it is time. This is increasingly becoming the key moment in the Sunday Breakfast Show. It is the Royal Slot with the Royal Editor of The Mirror, Russell Myers. Good morning, Russell.
Good morning, Kevin.
Quiet week?
Well, I thought I'd just put my feet up for a few days. It's
Unbelievable. You're all over the paper today, the Sunday Mirror. The Duchess of Cambridge, a quiet tribute, her own personal tribute to Sarah Everard on Clapham Common yesterday.
Yeah, it's a really interesting moment, this, and as you say, Kate turned up to Clapham Common to lay some flowers that she'd picked from the gardens of Kensington Palace, and indeed this was the vigil attended by thousands and thousands of people yesterday. Despite the police's best efforts to ruin it or to make sure it wouldn't go ahead, people decided to make a stand, and the Duchess of Cambridge was one of those people. And without fanfare, without minders, without letting the press know, she was actually identified and sort of pictured by a journalist who was there in a personal capacity, who sort of just left her to lay the flowers, and she was reading cards. And I think that this, in a week which, let's make no mistake, it's been one of the most crisis-hit weeks for the royal family in recent history, with the fallout of this Harry and Meghan interview. This was a genuine act of compassion, and one which was very, very, very personal.
Yeah, a personal statement, and a brave statement, really, because in a sense she sort of tacitly endorsed the gathering of these frightened and angry women who were making a point that they shouldn't have to fear the attentions of stalking males while they're on the street. So, she actually did something quite controversial, I think, and good for her, I'd say.
Yes, yeah, very, very much so. I think, there is a lockdown. There is a lot of feeling about this vigil that was attempted to have been stopped by the police. So yeah, it was quite a move outside the box, but one that I'm told she felt very, very passionately about. She's also watched with horror and disbelief the developments in this very, very tragic case, and I think that they just wanted to make a very, very personal moment for herself and for Sarah's family.
Yeah, and interestingly, didn't wear a mask. So as I say, once again, good for her, making a personal statement there, which brings me to the next point, really. That's William and Kate this week, both doing something quite extraordinary. The other day, when when William was visiting that school in East London, one of the press shouted a question, are you a racist family? And he said, no, we're very much not a racist family. Now, that doesn't sound much in the great scheme of things, but for a royal member of the family to actually come out and have to deny being racist was quite a moment. He also said he hadn't talked to Harry, but he intended to. I believe that when I see it, because apparently he hasn't spoken to him for a year. But I think that incident indicated to me, I don't know what you think, that William is absolutely furious about what Harry has been saying.
Oh gosh, I mean, you just, if you haven't seen the video, or as any of your listeners haven't, I suggest you go and check it out, because you can just, even though he's wearing a mask, you can tell he's very, very frustrated, to put it mildly. I think his eyebrows raised, you tell a lot about people's eyes these days, can't you? But William being asked and actually choosing to respond to a question shouted out by a member of the media is very, very rare indeed. Charles was asked whether he had seen the interview just a couple of days before, and was quite nervously let out a chuckle, but William, fair play, took it head on, and I think it's quite telling that 4 or 5 days after that interview that the world was talking about, he revealed that he hadn't spoken to his brother, but by promising, I will do, I think that tells you an awful lot about his feelings. And certainly the very fact that he'd had to say that at all, that we're very much not a racist family, tells you we are living in quite bizarre times. I think that there's been a lot of developments, there's been a lot of things said about this interview, and I think we're going to be speaking about it for quite some time, because the allegations labelled at the royal family by Harry and Meghan, whether it's one of racist abuse, whether it's one of abandonment to do with Meghan's mental health, these are very, very, very serious questions indeed, and we understand this weekend that the royal family are dealing with them head on.
Yes, and of course the papers today, particularly the Sunday Times, full of stories that the palace has stepped up its investigation into allegations that Harry and Meghan were outrageous bullies during their time as working royals in Britain. And also the statement from Her Majesty, or from the palace, that they would deal with the racism allegations privately, I suspect is not going to be enough. Just quickly, because we're pressed for time, Russell, I haven't really had a chance to ask you your general feelings about that interview. Let us know in just a second what you did feel about the Oprah moment. And secondly, do you think that the palace or the Queen is going to get away with saying we'll look at the racism privately? Because I don't think it's enough. I think just as the bullying allegations have to be investigated in an official public manner, so do the racism charges.
I think you're completely right, and that was what was my main point of shock, actually, when the palace came out. Took a couple of days to release a statement, which I didn't think was a bad thing. I thought the Queen wanted to sleep on it. She wanted to obviously let tempers die down a little bit, but they were very, very quick to announce a full investigation to do with Meghan's bullying accusations that have been labelled against her from previous staff, and yet they want to deal with this other accusations of racism within the family in-house. And I don't think that's going to wash, to be honest. As you say in the Sunday Times today, we have the claims are going to be handled by an independent external investigators, i.e. they've brought a big-time law firm in to conduct this investigation. Listen, I think that there are an awful lot of things labelled against the royal family in the interview. The ones of a senior member of the royal family using racist language, Meghan saying that she was completely abandoned and thrown to the wolves. And again, tensions are running very, very high. As Oprah Winfrey said to Harry and Meghan, how do they feel about giving their truth? Well, there are probably three truths around at the moment. There's their truth, the royal family's truth, and the actual truth. And it depends where we get to, but we're going to be talking for it for quite some time, I think.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the Queen's statement the other day, but it did contain that fantastic phrase, that fantastic piece of regal understatement in terms of Harry and Meghan's allegations about what happened while they were at the palace. The Queen said, "Recollections may vary," which was a brilliant piece of understatement. Excellent royal report, as always, Russell. Off you go, another busy week. We'll talk again this time next week. Thanks so much, Russell Myers, their royal editor of the Mirror. Let's quickly go over to my presenter's friend, Carol Decker. Are you there, Carol?
Right here.
Yes, what about that, what we were just discussing, the increasing tensions between Harry, Meghan and the royal family? Do you think that they're going to have to up the ante on what they're calling a private matter? They're going to look at the racism allegations in the family privately when they made such a public issue of a public inquiry, if you like, or an official inquiry into the bullying allegations against Harry and Meghan. I think they're going to have to do the racism in the same way, don't you think?
Yeah, well, as we touched on earlier, as they are, a forward-facing sort of business institution, these things have to be looked into, as any business would have to look into allegations of racism within, if you like, its staff or its workforce. But clearly, they need to get to the bottom privately first, I think, of who may have made the remarks and what the context was. And then they'll need to frame it, won't they? It's a very, very delicate matter. And I slightly disagree with you in as much as I think the Queen probably personally wants to find out exactly who said what before she puts it forward. I mean, she's not a cowardly woman. And she has a great deal, a big sense of duty to her country. I don't think she'll cover it up. I think she does need to get to the bottom of it herself first.
Yeah, we need to know who it was.
Yes.
And it could be that whoever it was will say there was no prejudice involved. It was merely a friendly inquiry. It is possible to speculate on the colour of an unborn child without being racist. We're going to find that out later in the show from a parent, a friend of mine who's a dad who has got, I think, 3 or 4 mixed race kids, all of whom came out different colours, and he said it was great fun trying to guess what colour they would be during the pregnancies, because he's of Asian descent and his wife's very much much, a blonde, I think from Slavic heritage. So we'll be talking about that later. So they need to establish if it happened, in what circumstances it was said, in what mood it was said, in what spirit it was said, or they may need to establish whether or not it happened at all. But it will have to be a proper inquiry. Carol, excellent interjection. We will be talking again soon. Carol Decker, my presenter's friend there. She'll be back commenting on the issues and the stories of the day throughout the rest of the programme. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Julia Hartley-Brewer at breakfast
on Talk Radio
with up-to-the-minute breaking news.
In a little while, we'll be talking to former police detective Maggie Oliver. She is the woman who helped smash the Rochdale paedophile ring. She has great professional experience of how some men can treat women in the most appalling way. So we'll be getting her take on the Sarah Everard situation and the fact that so many women now have just about had enough, and they are protesting that they shouldn't have to experience fear on our streets, and we all agree with that. But time now for a little bit of this. Yes, there's the American National Anthem, which signals the time to talk to our American abroad, who's usually here in London, Greg Swenson. But today he's in Naples, FLA, in sunny Florida. Morning, Greg.
Good morning, Kevin. Great to be here.
How's the weather out there?
It's perfect.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it. It's free.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
It's
the
free.
Land of the free.
Yeah, land of the free. It's freezing here. Listen, I need to ask you, Meghan and Harry's interview, you're over there experiencing America's reaction to it. Mm-hmm. This couple have stirred up a hornet's nest, haven't they? Accusing the royal family and indeed the British press of racism. And what we fear over here, and we're seeing signs of it, that millions of Americans now believe that Britain is some sort of racist medieval hellhole with attitudes that should have died out centuries ago. I mean, they're wrong, aren't they? This is not, you live in London. This is not a very racist country.
No, it's completely obscene. And I think Americans know that. I don't think they're fooled by, that ridiculous interview. And they're surely not fooled by the media. And look, and as you know, it's been going on since last June, all these, absurd accusations of racism in America. So I think the American public is somewhat used to that and understands how obscene and absurd it is. So, I think that the reaction here was similar to the reaction in the UK, where, and except for the extremely woke, most people were appalled and sort of, gagged at the interview.
So are we talking here, because we're getting loads and loads of headlines. I mean, one, I think it was part of the American press accused the British press, the Daily Mail in particular, of being racist because on one of its Harry and Meghan stories, one of the columnists had a headline saying, "I have niggling doubts about what they've been saying," and they were accused of being racist for using the word niggling, which is actually a Scandinavian word that sounds a little like the N-word. That's how ludicrous the debate has become.
Yeah, it really has, and I think it got a lot of attention here, a week ago. That's for sure. It's dying down quite a bit, and I think the reactions, again for the most part, were, gag worthy. I mean, it's just I can't think of a better word, because people were just so amazed, like shaking their heads at the and I guess you could even call it acting that we saw from Harry and Meghan. But I think there's a lot of sympathy for the monarchy here. There's the Americans.
They love our royal family, don't they?
They really do. I mean, and that's all the more
probably more than we do.
Yeah, possibly. Because we don't have one, and I think there's just a great relationship between the two countries, and there's an affiliation, and I think that's all the more reason why it was absurd for her to say that. She didn't know anything about the royal family. That's completely ridiculous. She would have been 16 years old when Princess or Lady Diana died, and it was just completely.
I was
obscene
there
for her to
then, and
say that.
it was wipeout in America.
Absolutely. 2.5 billion watched the funeral.
Absolutely.
It's absurd for her to say that. She knows it.
Yeah. Now, on that interview, I want you to clear up one of the great American mysteries, one of America's great mysteries that many of us over this side of the Atlantic cannot understand. This veneration of the great Saint Oprah Winfrey. Now, she's a brilliant networker. She's a clever businesswoman. She's amassed $1 billion fortune. I respect her. I've met her a couple of times, and she's a very nice lady. But she could not interview her way out of a paper bag. Why do Americans revere this woman so much?
I'm not sure that most Americans do. I think she's got a really loyal audience. That daytime. She had a great appeal to the daytime, stay-at-home audience in the 80s when she really became famous, and to a certain degree in the 90s. And she might have, there's definitely some respect for her, as you mentioned. She's a very successful business person. I'm from Chicago, where she's got legendary status because for many years her studios were based in the west side of Chicago, and so she's really got legendary status in that city, and that was a certain Midwestern appeal, a certain appeal to the center of the country, and she was able to reach into the sort of the living rooms of America for a while, but then she became just another part of that Hollywood West Coast culture, and I think in many ways has lost her appeal. She surely helped some politicians that
her endorsement gets you into the White House.
Absolutely.
Doesn't it?
If you want to get a book sold, you need to get it endorsed by Oprah, and if you have some aspirations for higher office, getting her blessing or endorsement is huge. So there's some respect for her in our circles, for sure, but by no means does she have any sort of broad appeal. I don't think she has a broad appeal.
That was a dreadful interview. It was without.
It was horrible.
Any sense
it was painful to watch. Not only was it completely gag worthy, from Harry and Meghan, but from Oprah too. It's just it just was.
She didn't ask enough questions. You need to know times, dates, places. She has no spirit of inquiry.
Of course not. And it was very obviously very rehearsed, and Meghan Markle was an actress, not a particularly good one, but she was an actress, and so
she was in Suits.
There you go. I mean, I of course, like most Americans, I had never heard of her until she married Harry, or
we certainly hadn't. Let's not just waste all of our time on the royal issues. Just before you go, Greg,
Sure.
So there is a massive border problem between the border of America and Mexico, where more and more South Americans come across the border to find paradise in the land of the free. Donald Trump recognized that problem, tried to close it down, build a wall. He did clamp down on immigration. Joe Biden's come in. He's got a great solution. Let them all in. Now, what do you think of that?
It's a completely self-inflicted wound. The border problem had been, it's never going to be permanently solved, but it had been really well managed by President Trump, and he got a lot of heat for it. But the reality is, the real unpleasant occurrences at the border started during the Obama administration. The so-called cages were built by the Obama administration, and as the famous picture of the cages on Time magazine trying to blame Trump for all immigration ills was photographed in 2014 during the Obama years, the Obama-Biden years. So. Look, we know that there were real problems at the border. Presidents on both sides of the aisle had ignored it for years. It was especially difficult during the Obama years. And President Trump, for the most part, managed it well and solved a lot of the problems there. Deportations were down considerably. All that talk about separating families had been reduced completely. And Biden, just because Trump was successful in dealing with it, like a lot of issues, whatever Trump did, Biden has to do the opposite. it's amazing to see that he's created this crisis just because Trump had managed the problem at the border, and not in any inhumane way at all. He'd actually handled it, quite humanely. And now President Biden he just unwound all of that just because it was done by Trump. He had to do the opposite, and you'll see that in other areas. This is the first one where the crisis is really obvious, but you'll see that in many other facets of Biden's policies and philosophy. So
indeed, and also don't forget Joe this week spent some of his presidential time and energy on endorsing Meghan's bravery in speaking out to Oprah Winfrey. It just keeps on getting worse, doesn't it, Greg?
You can't make it up.
When are you returning to the land of the unfree, Britain?
I'm flying back Monday night, so I'll be back in London on Tuesday morning. It's been a nice break to be here, where the restaurants are open.
Yeah, I was going to say you're
engaged with each other.
Yeah. So able to go for a drink and go for dinner. God almighty. Wish I was there, mate. Thank you so much for your time. We'll talk again next week when you're back in London. Greg Swenson from the Republican Overseas Organisation, all the way from sunny Naples, Florida, FLA. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
In a minute, we will be talking to a friend of mine, actually, who he's a very successful journalist out in Dubai. He is of Asian descent. His wife is of Slavic descent. They have a brood of babies, of kids, who all came out different colours. He will talk about the fun they had speculating what kind of kid would come out next. So this would obviously go to the heart of those claims by Harry and Meghan that to do that is racist. My friend will explain that it is far from that. Interesting story, this. But before we do that, let's talk about, once again, the problem of women on the streets in Britain. It clearly is a problem. We have to respect the deep feelings that those gathered on Clapham Common last night are protesting about. It is a serious situation. The police banned that demonstration, but with an inevitability, really, it did go ahead. I knew it would. And there were unpleasant scenes as the police got rather heavy-handed with some of them. But to be fair to the police, I suppose they had outlawed that event and they were defied. I suppose they had to try to police it in some way, but it wasn't a good look for the police. And Priti Patel is now investigating. We may even get a statement from the chief of the Met, Cressida Dick, later today. But let's go to someone who knows all about the terrible way that some men treat women. She knows about this in a professional capacity. We're talking to former police detective Maggie Oliver, who was, of course, the whistleblower who helped to smash the Rochdale paedophile ring. So she really does know what she's talking about in this area. Good morning, Maggie.
Good morning, Kevin. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Your thoughts last night on that situation on Clapham Common. The police had banned that event, but I knew it would go ahead anyway. Feelings are running very high among women, particularly in London, where they don't feel safe on the streets. Do you think that demonstration, or it was really a vigil more than anything, should have been allowed to go ahead? That would have diffused the situation as long as they practice social distancing?
I think it was very clear that it was going to go ahead, Kevin, and I think it would have been more helpful for the police to work with the organisers than to ban it altogether. But I have to say that for me, that is a distraction really from the real really important things around this. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the original Reclaim the Streets demonstrations after the Yorkshire Ripper, and that violence against women there was really prevalent. And, the authorities were not dealing with it then. We are, 40 years on? My life has become all about violence against women. And that's why I started the Maggie Oliver Foundation, because it's very clear that victims of rape and attacks are not being taken seriously. And, you know, the only way we have of sending a message out that violence against women or rape is not acceptable is for the criminal justice system to deal with it properly. And, you know, the reality is that rape prosecutions in this country are at their very lowest level ever. 98% of reported rapes are not prosecuted. And that leads to a situation where there is no public confidence in the authorities to protect women when they are out. And, you know, Kevin, I've got 3 sons of my own. I am not a man hater. No. And I believe that most men are decent human beings. But there is always going to be an element amongst men who, if they feel they can get away with this, they will.
Can I ask you about that, Maggie? You know, I think it's important to stress that the vast majority of men are not like this. They are, after all, husbands, they are sons, they are brothers, and they care about the women in their life and they respect women generally. That's important to stress. This is a tiny, awful minority. But you know about this. Toxic masculinity. What is it about some men that they just want to treat women like pieces of meat and feel that it's perfectly all right to harass them and shout lewd comments at them? What is it about toxic masculinity?
I don't know. I think it probably is something to do with their upbringing, with the background, with the messages being sent out. But, you know, I'm known because I stood up against the authorities failing to prosecute men, as you say, initially in the Rochdale grooming gang scandal. But over the years since then, I have seen that this is not just Rochdale, this is everywhere. And if the authorities, if the police and the criminal justice system and the CPS do not deal and tackle with violence against women properly in accordance with the law, that leaves every potential victim vulnerable. And it also means that those men who are going to attack women in whatever way feel that they can do that with kind of impunity, that the law is not going to address it. And really, rape has virtually been decriminalized. You know, the chances of you being prosecuted if you rape a woman now are virtually non-existent. And that is where the issue really is. You know, and I think that's what the demonstration last night was really about. Yes, Sarah Everard has brought it into the public arena again, but the furore will die down. The problem of lack of prosecutions of rapists and men who do attack women will remain long after this case has faded.
Yes, very good points there, Maggie. Time is against us. I want to thank you very much for your time this morning and to encourage you to keep up the great work that you do. That's Maggie Oliver, their former British detective with the Greater Manchester Police, the whistleblower who exposed the Rochdale paedophile ring, and a woman who knows all about how badly men can treat women at times. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is the home and the zone of free speech and common sense Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
We need to be vigilant about these other variants.
Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
Okay, this is the final hour. Are you ready for a time check, ladies and gentlemen? It is 9:02. Wait a minute, it's just moving on to 9:03. There you go. breakfast time check for you. This is the final hour. As I say, 60 sizzling minutes still ahead. Carol Decker, my presenter's friend, will join me for a substantial section at 9:30. We're going to go through the papers, some of the lighter stories of the day, catch up with Carol. And, of course, we will bring down the curtain on another fantastic roller coaster radio spectacular in the company of Caroline Frost, entertainment journalist. That will be her essential show business review. I want to talk about Piers Morgan. Did you know Great Good Morning Britain has lost half of its audience since he quit? 500,000 viewers in 2 days. Man, that is a problem. So we'll be talking to Caroline about that. Also, I'm going to talk to Lady Carnarvon. She's the first lady, if you like, of Downton Abbey. Actually, it's Highclere Castle in real life, but millions know Highclere Castle as Downton Abbey. Lady Carnarvon's very, very worried about the future of stately homes because of the coronavirus crisis. They have to keep their gates shut until May the 17th, and she does not like that. So looking forward to talking to a genuine aristocrat. I've spoken to her before, a very nice lady, so that should be good. But first, I want to talk to the editorial director of an Arabian news business, Mr. Anil Boyrell. Good morning, Anil.
Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Long time, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I've got to say, by the way, you've got Carol Decker on the show, which is amazing, because I've got Bridge of Spies, the album, and the follow-up album, Rage.
Well, she's listening, so she'll love that. We'll talk about...
I'm a huge fan.
Well,
yeah, I'm very thrilled to be on the same show as her.
Well, yeah, so you're...
By the way, you got the wrong job title, but never matter. Doesn't matter.
Well, what do you want me to call you then?
It's Media is the company, but don't worry about it.
All right. Well, you're based over in Dubai. Lovely,
I am.
Lovely sunny place. But listen, mate, you've got a brilliant article in this week's Spectator magazine, which is under the headline "In the Mix." Why is it racist to wonder what skin colour your child will have? Well, of course, we know what this is about. This is the fact that Meghan and Harry say that a member of the royal family inquired after the potential colour of her unborn child, and they framed it that they were concerned that the kid might come out too dark. But a lot of people seem to think that even speculating on what colour a baby will be from mixed parents is racist. Now, you're of Asian descent, and your wife is from Slovenia, very blonde. So you've got 3 kids. They've all come out different colours, and you two and your respective families had great fun speculating on what colour your kids would be.
Well, I think everybody had great fun, not just our families, me, my wife, our families, our friends, everybody. You know, it's really interesting. I think it's very amusing. It's fascinating. I think the problem is that Meghan and Harry have sort of appointed themselves as sort of spokespeople for interracial couples around the world. But if you ask most interracial couples, and I have, and there's plenty here in Dubai, we don't give a damn. This is really interesting. It's really funny. You know, some people have said to me, it's context. Yeah, but you can still make jokes about the color of your skin. You know, I think things have gone so far extreme, especially in the UK, where you can't say anything, write anything, think anything. But to most people, and especially people like me, I mean, my kids make jokes about their color every day. They make it to me, I make it to them. And, you know, as I said in the Spectator article, my mum was really hoping that our firstborn would be brown, because he was more likely, she thought, to be Hindu.
Yeah, so she wanted to lure her your first kid into the Hindu religion. Meanwhile, your wife's family were hoping she'd come out white. They could be a Christian.
Yeah, basically. But by the time, and it was a bit more white than my mum hoped for, but by the time we got to the second child, the funny thing is my wife's family were like, okay, we're done with the white kid. Can we have a brown one? You know, it would be a bit of a better mix now. You know, we talk about this all the time.
And own up, Andy. Own up. You were taking bets with your mates what colour your kids were going to be.
I was actually, yeah. I lost about 100 quid. And to be honest, I said it would be really, really white, the third one. And I lost a lot of money on the third child. But you know, if I was doing that today in the UK, I guess everybody would cancel me. You know, it's it's all gone a bit crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I suppose some families might take it a little bit more seriously than you did, but I can't imagine.
I don't think they do.
I can't imagine why, to be honest with you. But how did they? So you've got 3 kids. 2 of them came out on the white side of the fence, and another came out on the brown side.
Yeah, and as I said in the story, that when the 3rd one came out on the brown side, most people I know in the UK, most of my friends, who you know some of them, were convinced that I was not the father. Because it was.
It's still a possibility.
Well, it's still possible. I still hear that. My wife says that. But no, I think we speculated that it would be more white. The kid was more brown. But actually, all the 3 kids are actually quite different colors, and me and my wife are different colors. So we have 5 different colors in our family. We have 2 religions. My wife and kids are in Bolivia at the moment, where they're surrounded by all kinds of races and religion. And I think I made the point in the story. I think there's about 10 different colors and religions around the table at Christmas. And we talked about color and race and religion. Because you do, but I just fear, I'm pretty sure that to even talk about it right now in the UK is a problem. It means you must be, it's kind of a taboo subject. I don't know why, because most interracial couples, like me and my wife, and actually like a lot of couples I know, don't have a problem with this. It is totally normal, but I just feel it's quite annoying when you see Harry and Meghan now, because they said this, they've become the sort of authority on this. I mean, we don't know the context of it. And I personally don't believe it was said in a racist context. I can see some royal having a couple of drinks and saying, hey, what colour is the baby going to be?
Yeah, like you and your friends and your wife did, and your families did. That it was something you discussed over copious bottles of wine for a good laugh, took bets, and I think most people would treat it like this. But if this incident happened, Harry and Meghan obviously treated it in a very po-faced, serious way. Possibly they had a reason to do that. Possibly the question was posed in a prejudiced way. I hope your baby doesn't come out too brown. That would be awful. But I have my doubts about it. But they have, of course, now, in effect, not only cast aspersions about the royal family potentially being racist, but it's the whole country of Britain being racist. Americans, millions of Americans, thanks to that Oprah interview, now believe that Britain is some sort of medieval racist hellhole. You're from here. You're a man of colour. This is not a very racist country, Britain. Don't you feel?
It's total nonsense. I mean, Kevin, you remember me and you used to live across the road from each other about 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah, with disastrous results.
Yes. And we used to drink in the same pub sometimes. And I remember those days very well. I think in the Steele's pub in particular, there was probably 20 different races, religions, colours. There was never a problem. If you read the papers in the UK and you listen to TV, you get the impression that if you're a guy of colour or a woman of colour, you're going to be, beaten up at the moment you get off the plane at Heathrow Airport and locked in jail and, whatever, abused on the streets. That isn't the case. Now, I know there's problems. There is racism in every society. There's racism here where I am, in Dubai. It's all over the world. But on relative terms, and you lived in America, the UK is doing very, very well. I know a lot of people listening to this won't agree with me, but I think it is all relative. And I still go to the UK 4 or 5 times a year. I worked in the Mirror with you. We had 200 journalists, mostly white, admittedly. But I tell you what, nobody spoke to me for the first 3 months at the Mirror, not because of my colours, because I wasn't getting any good stories.
I think nobody spoke to you because of your personality.
Well, maybe both, but it wasn't because of the color of my skin, and a serious point, and you know that as well. But I used to read when I was in the Mirror. I used to read stuff in the papers then in the Guardian actually about how terrible media is and that there needs to be more diversity and all that kind of stuff. But it was the most open-minded, fun place that I worked, and even when you read stuff about Piers and Kelvin and all these people. I mean, these people were so welcoming and couldn't have done, personally for me, as you say, a man of color, couldn't have done more to help me in media, not because of the color of my skin. They judged you entirely as you should be on the quality of your stories.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. You should bring that up, Anil, because as someone who got lots of experience of Fleet Street, that was one of the places that Meghan and Harry said was rife with toxic racism. The British press were accused of being racist. Now, I accept that there have been times when newspapers have maybe crossed the line in their craven pursuit of readers. The thing about journalists is if they can spot any way to put the circulation up on virtually anything, they may well go for it. And at times there's been a sort of certain anti-Muslim sentiment expressed in the papers, possibly to get a few readers. Now that might have happened at times, and that is not a good thing. But in terms of the actual journalists that work on Fleet Street, I worked on Fleet Street 40 years. I never once met a racist on Fleet Street. What about you?
Never. Never once on Fleet Street or any other street. And I'll add that before I came to Fleet Street, I was working on a building site for a few years, and I didn't actually come across any racists there or any racism there. So it is very limited. I think there's a difference between being a journalist and being a headline writer or a sub-editor.
Yeah.
And somebody may twist a headline to go in a certain direction. But you know better than me. We spent years there, and we hung out with all these people, with each other, and it was a brilliant place to work. I don't know if it's the same in America. I probably doubt it.
Well, that's the point, Anil. It's not. That's what makes me slightly annoyed, having experience of living in both countries, that you've got millions of Americans, thanks to Oprah's interview with Harry and Meghan, now believing Britain is a very racist place. Britain is not a particularly racist place, but America is. They're the ones with the problem, not here.
Well, even in modern day America, my brother lives in California. And obviously he's Asian as well. But one thing that struck me when I go there is all the Asians hang out together. The white community.
Yeah, that's right. It's very compartmentalized in America. Every city has the place where the blacks live, the place where the Hispanics live, and the place where the whites live. They very, very compartmentalized, a kind of almost unofficial system of segregation.
It's kind of apartheid, and I think if you go to Florida, I think you've been there a lot. I've heard in Florida, in maybe 1 week's holiday in Florida, more racist terms than I've heard in 30 years of living in the UK. And that's just casual racism in restaurants and shops, in hotels, and this is a country that's supposedly not racist. You can't compare it to the UK. It's completely different.
Well, listen, Anil, when you're next back here, we'll return to the Steels for a couple of pints. So it would be nice to see you again after all these years.
I think it's closed down.
No, they've reopened it, mate. They've reopened it. It's not what it used to be, but you'll be horrified when you see it. They've gentrified it. I knew they would one day. That was as soon as you didn't go there anymore. It immediately went up market, in my view.
I'll bring my Carol Decker album to...
Well, we're going to talk. We're going to go straight over to Anil now. There's someone in the background now. Anil Boyrell, thank you so much for your time. You are the founder of JES Media, JES Media in Dubai. Old friend of mine on his multicolored brood and the business of racism generally. Thank you so much, Anil. And look, there's Carol. Carol Decker. Say hello to Anil Boyrell.
Wow.
Hi, Anil.
This is the greatest honor. I'm on the same show as you.
I'm flattered. Thank you.
No, I've got the album, and you've got 11 tracks on the first album, and I got the very last track, by the way, when you do a reprise of China in Your Hand, it should have been a bit longer. It was only 50 seconds.
Oh, okay. I'll have a word with someone.
You remember that? Yeah, if you could reissue, it would be great.
All right, Anil, thank you so much, mate. Let's see you soon. Thank you so much. So what do you think, Carol? Now you've got your biggest fan over there in Dubai. What do you think about his comments that, basically if you are mixed race parents, it's actually fun to speculate on what colour the kid might be?
Yeah, I think if it's done in a family context like that, like I said, I've got mixed race cousins as well. But I definitely think, look, Harry's ginger like me and Meghan is biracial. So I think everybody would have been going, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if it'll have red hair. It's okay to speculate. And I just think Anil is just hysterical that they took bets on it and everything. It can be done in a very light-hearted way.
He's like that, trust me.
But Meghan and Harry, we don't know. We have to be careful what we say. They seem to weaponize everything deliberately to me.
Yeah, it did seem like they kind of they sort of took the detonation pins out of the grenades and lobbed them our way. I mean, I think they deliberately tried to stir up some trouble there. And if they were intent on stirring up trouble, they certainly succeeded. You'll be back with me in just a little while, Carol. We're going to go through a few of the other stories in the Sunday papers today. Looking forward to doing that. Carol Decker there, my presenter's friend, back with us in a minute. When we come back, we're going up market. We're going to talk to the First Lady of Downton Abbey. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
We're doing everything that we can to protect against new variants of the virus.
Talk Radio.
Unmistakable theme tune of Downton Abbey, which of course is a fictional stately home played by the magnificent Highclere Castle, which is down near Newbury in Hampshire, and the First Lady of Highclere Castle, Lady Carnarvon, the Countess of Carnarvon, joins me now. Good morning, Lady Carnarvon.
Good morning, Kevin.
Now, you're here on a very serious mission, and that is to highlight the fact that, among other businesses, stately homes are really suffering because of the agonisingly slow roadmap to freedom that was unveiled by Boris Johnson a couple of weeks ago. Like pubs, stately homes will not be able to open their doors until May the 17th. Now, if I came to... I've been to your fabulous residence.
Thank you.
I actually went there when you were filming. I went there with another radio station. I was about to name it there. You're not allowed to do that in the radio business. It was for the BBC. Anyway, they were filming inside your house. And what a lot of people don't realise is some of those interior scenes that became so famous were actually the rooms that you live in.
No, absolutely. A lot of Downton Abbey is filmed inside and outside here, and we've been really lucky to be part of the journey. And they've also obviously gone to some other stately homes, museums, farm parks. They've used lots of different areas of Britain, up and down, and Inverary Castle or Alnwick. I know there's a farm, I've forgotten where it is, I think in Buckinghamshire they go to as well. So it's a great advert for Britain.
Now, so it's obviously put Highclere Castle very much on the map as probably the go-to stately home that everybody wants to visit. What a fabulous business that must have been for you. Other stately homes do very well as well. Of course, they've been in a state of suspension now throughout the coronavirus crisis. Now, if I came to visit Highclere Castle, I could walk around the grounds. I don't know if you're allowed inside or not, but surely walking around the grounds of Highclere Castle is no risk to spreading the virus. Why so tortuously slow in the case of stately homes? Surely they could open their gates before May the 17th.
Well, that was exactly my question, Kevin. I just said, we're part of the hospitality, leisure, culture, museums. We're all in the same boat. There are millions of people are employed in this business. We buy food from the fishermen, food from the farmers, Rodder's Cornish clotted cream, and we are sort of offering COVID secure, if you like. We have all the protocols. We are continuing with spacing and not crowding people together. And we're just saying, may we not open in a small way just to begin to turn the propellers rather than almost lose the first 6 months of this year to not being open. And I've had emails from so many different museums and businesses. Coach companies are going out of business. B&Bs are going out of business. It's pretty desperate because it's 6 months of this year on top of last year. And I'm not saying this virus isn't unbelievably dangerous. And one of my sisters works in the hospital, and I try and welcome NHS staff and nurses to say thank you. But we need to build back better. We just need to begin to start to pay taxes to pay for what we've gone through. So that was my question. What's the evidence that makes it so dangerous, Kevin, for you to walk around a one-way 400-metre tour, 3 or 4 metres apart from someone else? What is the danger?
Well, I would say very little danger at all. How important is the income from tourism to stately homes and indeed to your stately home?
It's for everything. Think of Hampton Court, Windsor Castle, Alnwick Castle, Blenheim Palace, us. That's what we are. We're a business. It's not a. It is and was a family home, but that's not what it's about. It's about a business. It attracts people from around the world, and 80% of international tourists come to this country to see a stately home. So it's part of what we advertise, as opposed to, gyms or hairdressers or non-essential shops. And I can't see the data that tells me one is more dangerous than another, Kevin. And I have already booked a back massage, but I would also like to be able to book people and welcome people here. And again, I'm not decrying the danger of COVID, and what we've all been through is horrific and tragic for so many people. But my God, we've done so well. And look at the vaccination program. I think all of our visitors would be vaccinated by the time we had thought we could open. So I'm just kind of putting my hand up in class, because we have a presence in terms of marketing on behalf of some of the other museums and chairmen of museums who have all written in as well. And none of us have had a single response.
I know that seems to be the case for lots of people making inquiries about why the lockdown is so long. They never get any response from their MPs. They seem to have shut up shop in terms of discussing that very important issue. Why is it, Lady Carnarvon, that I will be able to very soon go to my local department store? In fact, I can go to supermarkets already. That apparently is no danger to me, indoors in a shop. But to come to your magnificent grounds outside, that is a danger. That's absurd, isn't it?
Well, people can come outside. There are already footpaths through the park, but that doesn't, for us, we would like to open the castle, as would a museum, as would other large venues and spaces in London or in Manchester. And equally well, if you suggest to people that they go out and meet people in a more COVID-secure environment, I would have thought that's perhaps safer than saying go into other people's houses and gardens, in which case you're going to have to go make yourself a cup of tea or go to the loo. So I think it's just the common sense of it all. And perhaps some of those who are telling us we can go shopping in a supermarket haven't recently been shopping in a supermarket, where there are not one-way tours. So it's just, I'm not trying to say they should be shut. I'm just saying, please, could you explain it? And if we perhaps go out in a safe manner, perhaps that is safer than not going out and therefore remaining in an unsafe manner.
I think, Lady Carnarvon, the problem is there are all sorts of anomalies in these rules that don't add up. And when the likes of you, or indeed me, say, could you explain this absurdity, they can't, and so they don't. I think that's the problem. Do you miss the days of Downton Abbey? There's talk they might make a second movie. Would you like that?
Oh, of course. I think there's been quite strong rumours, and that's fantastic. And again, in years to come, that'll, I'm sure, draw back international tourists, which is a very important of the UK economy, into this country. And there's many amazing places they can visit. And we are uniquely defined by our visible heritage, which is the stately homes, the extraordinary landscapes. Whether it's Cornwall or down here, Northumberland or Yorkshire, there are amazing homes and landscapes to visit. But we just need to make sure they're still there, because then the phoenixes can rise from the ashes and don't remain and be driven into a pile of ashes. Because we are now, like other homes, hotels, we're transferring the kindest of customers from spring into the summer, which means we'll have no new money, as will the local hotels. We're working with them to try and transfer people forward. So again, in the end, there won't be any new taxes to pay, because the hotels are transferring people forward. So it's actually quite a big roadblock that has been set up, and I just don't think it helps the long-term economy. And I was talking to a local mental health charity who are just desperate. They're desperate for money, and they're desperate for things to do and places to take them. And I feel just so sad that I can't help them. I can talk to them, yes, and plan, but May the 17th is a long way off, Kevin.
Yeah, tell me about it. And then the rest, we've all got to wait until the Midsummer's Day, June the 21st, until apparently full freedom is bestowed upon us again, which again seems a long, long way off, particularly when you look at the statistics, the death rates, the case rates, which are plummeting. I wish we could all get out a lot faster, and I wish you could open the gates of Highcliffe Castle very, very soon. Lady Carnarvon, thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best with the rebirth of your stately home and other stately homes around around the country. Thank you so much. Lady Carnarvon there, First Lady of Downton Abbey. Actually, it's Highclere Castle, but Highclere Castle was the star of Downton Abbey. It played at Downton Abbey. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is Talk Radio.
Across the UK.
Online and on DAB+.
Mark Dolan on Talk Radio.
And those cases are coming down, down, down.
Breaking news, big guests and live debate across the UK.
And the accusation is quite horrific, the idea that the colour of their unborn child's skin was somehow a factor in whether or not he might become a prince.
Mark Dolan.
Weekday afternoons from 4
on Talk Radio. Talk Radio.
Your trusted 24-hour resource for breaking news, essential information and non-stop conversation.
I think it will take time to bring people back off furlough.
Unparalleled radio for unprecedented times.
If it makes schools safer, then, I think a few weeks of it is a small price to pay.
Online, on DAB+, and on the Talk Radio app.
Talk Radio.
Kevin O'Sullivan
on Talk Radio.
Caroline Frost joins me fairly soon to discuss Piers Morgan and his departure from Good Morning Britain. Good Morning Britain is now in crisis. The share price of ITV is falling and Good Morning Britain has lost half of its audience. 500,000 people have deserted the ship, the sinking ship, you might say, since Piers' dramatic quitting just a couple of days ago. They say no man is bigger than the show, but Piers looks like he's bigger than Good Morning Britain. It's going to be very interesting how ITV gets itself out of that predicament. But first, let's talk to my presenter's friend for the day. What a great job she's done, Carol Decker from Tapau. Hi, Carol.
Hello. Happy Mother's Day. Got my call.
You're there. Where's your dog today? Where's Finn?
Oh, Finn, he just got back from a walk. He's super muddy. So he's in the utility room drying off.
Okay. And there's your Mother's Day's card as well. So you've got dutiful kids. Now, I don't really need it because I'm so fantastically, naturally good looking. But interesting syndrome going on. Story in The Guardian the other day that more and more modern men are using makeup. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's great. It's fine. I'm always trying to get my old man to put on a bit of moisturiser or something because he's.
Is he one of them? He won't even. I mean, I'll be honest here. I mean, I don't wear makeup, but I've always used moisturiser because I get quite dry skin. But is your old man one of those real tough guys who wouldn't even consider that sort of nonsense?
He's in the army. He's an ex-rugger player. So, of course, that's, you're completely compromising your masculinity if you put any sort of cream on your face.
That's right. It's like my dad used to think shampoo was for women and used to wash his hair with carbolic soap.
No, but I think a lot of young guys like to wear makeup. I would say I wouldn't personally, as a woman, find it necessary for a guy to wear makeup for me, but if he wants to take care of his hair, wear a nice cologne, have a shave, a nice balm, keep your skin soft. I've always liked a guy who takes care of himself. But apparently this all started as a market for male products back in the
18th century, yeah.
Where you wouldn't want to be a donkey. I was just looking at the ingredients.
Oh, didn't they use donkeys' man bits?
Yeah, a donkey's
testicles.
Man,
we can say that. I think.
Gentleman vegetables. Yeah, and they got ground into a dust.
See, that's why that's why I'm not using makeup. I'm not rubbing donkey's testicles into my face. I tell you.
Oh,
never again. Never again.
Yeah. So there were all sorts of like hogs, gall, so the contents of pig stomachs and stuff. They were used to take inflammation down when shaving started then, and also to try and thicken hair. Guys are always trying to hold on to their barnet, aren't they? So you rub your old donkey's testicle powder into your hair and hope it makes it grow.
Yeah, well, anyway, you're right. I think it's a generational thing. If blokes want to wear makeup, Go ahead. It's not really for me, though, I don't think. Let's move on. The Sunday Times today, one of the many papers covering this story. Thousands may be let into the FA Cup final to kick off Britain's summer of fun. Do you think that it is a good idea to open the stadiums to crowds again before the end of this season?
Personally, I do. I can't wait to get back to normal. I'm definitely on that side of the camp. And Oliver Dowden, the culture secretary, wants to let 20,000 fans in without social distancing. And there are some other events as well, I think, around darts and snooker, where they want to experiment, if that's the right word, with indoors and outdoor crowds, different sporting events, and just with a limited amount of people. And then I guess they'll be doing testing, won't they, or seeing if it's spiked a bit. But it's got to be done. Obviously, COVID.
We've got to face up to it, haven't we, Carol? I mean, the point is when we come out of lockdown, as I keep saying, lockdowns, they do work, but only on a temporary basis. When you come out of lockdown, the cases start to go up, deaths start to go up. Hopefully not as steeply as they did before the lockdown. So they can be kind of effective in slowing it down, but don't imagine they're going to stop the virus. So when we come out of this really long lockdown, it's about 4 months this time, it's our longest yet, get ready. Cases are going to go up, deaths will go up. We've got to live with that, haven't we, rather than panic and go back into lockdown.
We've got the vaccine now. I had mine the other day, my first jab, and already the figures are plummeting, and they've got drugs that they repurposed as well, arthritis drugs and things that they found helped with the symptoms. And we cannot go on living like this. We can't. And even if lockdowns did work, it doesn't matter. We can't live like this. I'm like everybody else. I've had some real down moments, and I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky where I live and how I live. And if it's getting to me, I can't imagine how it's getting to people who've got young children. They might be in a small flat. They're trying to homeschool. I can't imagine. I've had some terrible moments, I can assure you. And we cannot go on like this. We just can't. And I don't mean to sound callous in any way, because it could be me. I'm 63. I have asthma.
No.
I also have an autoimmune disorder. I could catch it and snuff it, but I want to take my chances, and I want to get back to normal, and I want people to get their lives and their sanity back.
Yeah, and I don't think, I don't want to talk about the new normal. We need to get back to at least a facsimile of the old normal, because that's what people want. They want their old lives back. And I'm afraid that will come at some cost in terms of the coronavirus. Some people will catch it. A few people will still die from it. Boris Johnson indicated the other day that that's what we've got to learn to live with. And I'm not convinced that millions of people will be able to do that, having been scared witless for the last year or so, not least by that kind of terrifying advertising campaign by the bloody government.
Oh God, and Mark Strong, the voice of Dr. Death. I'll never be able to watch him in a movie again. I'm glad that Boris and Chris Whitty have changed their narrative the other week to explain to people, to make it clear to people that COVID is now endemic, and that means it's out there, like SARS, like the flu, like pneumonia. It's out there, and every year some people get sick, and very, very sadly, some vulnerable and elderly people die every year. And I don't mean to talk about them as collateral damage. If my mother was still alive now, she died a couple of years ago, I'd be terrified for her, because she's in that group. But we can't close the world down.
Yeah, we can't keep running from this. We've got to confront it.
Targeted protection as best we can, and that doesn't mean zero COVID, like it doesn't mean zero pneumonia, like it doesn't mean zero mumps and zero flu. These things exist. They exist in the world.
Yeah, and we don't need a government that seems to have turned itself into the anti-death league. People do die, and we better get used to it. We used to be used to it. Suddenly, we're trying to prevent all deaths at all costs. It's getting a bit ridiculous. So here's to the old normal, Carol, and when we get the old normal, we'll have a couple of drinks in what we used to call pubs. That would be nice, wouldn't it? Let's move on. Just before you go, the Sunday Express today. Are you a tea drinker?
I'm actually a coffee drinker.
Yeah, I am too. Yeah, well, that would explain everything, because apparently tea boosts your brain power.
Yeah, I used to drink a lot of tea. I found when I moved on to coffee that tea tasted a little bit insipid after that. But I've heard, it's an old story that the antioxidants and the catechins in tea are very good for keeping down inflammation. And now they're doing studies that it may help, to stop dementia drivers and fine. But personally, I don't drink a lot of tea, but it is supposed to be quite good for you, especially green tea. Apparently, that's full of antioxidants. It's supposed to be quite health benefits.
Well, listen, Carol, I want to thank you for being my presenter's friend today. You've done a fabulous job. Before you go, what are your plans for the rest of Mother's Day? You've got a card. Any family events? Are you going out to a local restaurant? Oh, no, wait a minute.
No, we can't. I've got a couple of cards, got all my prezzies. My kids brought me some prezzies in the gaps in the show. My husband, as you know, Richard is a tremendous chef, so he's got a big lunch planned, and there's a couple of bottles of red winking at me. I've been up so early for you, Kevin. I feel like starting drinking now. It feels like the middle of the day.
Yeah, welcome to my nightmare. And what about professionally as we come out of lockdown? Any plans for tours or concerts or anything like that? Have you got anything in the offing?
Yeah. My inbox has been nice and healthy with gigs coming back online that got postponed. Quite a few have gone to 2022. I don't even know if I'll still be alive by then. But lots of festivals that were in the latter part of the year anyway, like August, September, they've said we're going ahead. Fantastic news, because Boris is working towards June, and please do not change your mind, Boris. Please don't do a U-turn. So yeah, and that's cheered me up. The thought of being able to work again, earn some money again, it has definitely cheered me up. I felt my mentality shift a little.
Yeah, well, good. I'm glad that you're going to get back to as I keep saying, we need to get back to the old normal, and Carol Decker and Tapao on tour. That's part of the old normal. Good to be able to introduce you to one of your super fans earlier. I didn't realise that. My friend Anil Boyle, he said, "Oh, you got Carol Decker on? That's amazing." There you go. Fame at last. So international fame.
I know. Well, I've done quite a few gigs in Dubai as well. It's not a place I'd want to live, but it was a very nice place to do a show. You get very, very well looked after out there.
Well, next time you're out there, get in touch with Anil, because he knows that place like the back of his hand, and he's well connected. So
I've got in now. Thanks, Kev.
There you go. I've done you a big favour, but you did me a big favour by being an excellent presenter's friend. Thank you so much, Carol. Let's talk again soon. Carol Decker, Tapao pop legend, holding my hand throughout today's show, and I think you'll agree she's done a damn good job. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and this is the home and the zone of free speech and common sense. Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB, and on the Talk Radio app. Talk Radio. On Talk Radio.
What a great show today. I hope it has kick-started your Sunday. A get up and go show, I hope you agree. We've covered all the big issues of the day, a lot going on, and we've managed to squeeze all the big stories in over an eventful 3 hours. Still got a little way to go. Arguably the best part of the show when we bring the curtain down in the company of Caroline Frest, entertainment journalist. But let's have a bit of music first.
There's no business like show business, like no business I know. Everything.
Morning, Caroline. What happened to Let Me Entertain You?
I don't know, Kevin. Very disappointed, but there we go. Perhaps that's my challenge each week, is to come up with something.
Yeah,
can I just say, can I ask you, as a fellow journo, hasn't it been an exhausting week? Frankly?
Really. I mean, I had Russell Myers on, the royal editor of the Mirror, earlier, and I said, quiet week. I mean, he sounded almost at the end of his tether. I mean, It doesn't matter what area you work in, general news, crime, royals, everything is so febrile at the moment. It seems to be the nature of the times we live in. They are very, very turbulent. And they're nowhere are they more turbulent than in the always eventful world of show business, where Piers Morgan's departure from Good Morning Britain, and what was it now, only a couple of days ago, 3-4 days ago, Thursday, wasn't it? Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday he quit, so he wasn't on the show Thursday. He's never on the show Friday, but in the light, or in the wake of his dramatic departure, Good Morning Britain, which was over 1 million viewers, was challenging the BBC at last. It was actually beat Breakfast Time on the BBC for the first time in its history on the day Piers is left. As he said, my work is done. Certainly is. Since then, in 2 days, they lost 500,000 viewers. They've lost half the audience. This is a catastrophe.
This is disaster. I mean, this is basically Chewbacca. ITV is Chewbacca, and he's got a bending bar, and those walls are closing in because on the one side, you need the advertising money and you need the spend, and on the other hand, the side you need the audiences. And if one buckles, the other will soon to fall. I mean, this is the great dilemma that ITV have had. I think we've touched on this in the past, and I mean, Clarkson, I guess, was the nearest comparison. What is that these broadcasters, they hire these people, mostly men, but let's say people, for their opinions, their strength of personality, their ability to pull in a crowd, to reach audiences other parts cannot reach. And then they get crossed when they do exactly that. They spin forth with their unpredictable, very singular opinions. And then, of course, they cross the line. Clarkson did it. Ant Middleton did it recently, and now Piers has done it. I think Piers is the biggest, definitely the biggest loss for ITV to bear. And how they quite replace him with that sort of, I mean, he brought in everything. He wasn't just a presenter. He was basically their one-man celebrity booker. He was their one-man social media manager with his enormous Twitter following. Yeah. He's their one-man opinion maker because his tabloid columns.
He's unique.
How they replace that, I can't begin to think.
Yeah, he's unique. He's literally irreplaceable. And I doubt they'll ever get that audience back. But on a more serious note, the money markets have noticed, and the share price of ITV is plummeting. £300 million has been wiped off the value of the company. So Piers' departure has had serious ramifications for this company. Now, the company took the line that it did not approve of Piers, saying he didn't believe what Meghan was saying, particularly in relation to her mental health issues, her suicidal thoughts, and her charges of racism. They didn't like that. If you like, they've taken the woke route. They have, in Piers' opinion, quashed his right to freedom of speech. They took that line. Well, I hope they think it's worth it, because it's costing them a fortune.
I think perhaps the only optimistic view they can take is the long view, which is that Dame Carolyn McCall, the ITV executive, came over from The Guardian, and she brought with her this new set of values. And we've seen that they have pointed...
They're going well, aren't they?
No, not in the short term. But they've appointed a diversity director. They've come on board with the Mind charity and other mental health charities. So they had no choice. Remember how the BLM protest for BGT last summer, firmly on the side of progressive, as you call them, woke values. So they really had no choice. When somebody then goes on very high profile, their golden fleece in Piers Morgan, this is, I don't believe a word of somebody who is alleging that she had very serious mental health issues, they absolutely backed themselves into a corner. But as you say, that isn't necessarily, but certainly ITV, perhaps the BBC could have played that card, but I'm not sure that's where the ITV audiences is with those sensibilities. So this is the great challenge, how they marry those two things going forward. Good luck, everybody.
Yeah,
I'm not doing it.
It's a commercial business. They're trying to make money. I mean, quite why they prioritise being woke and progressive over making profits, I really cannot work out, Caroline. But we will discuss this further on our next Show Business Bulletin.
Coming on. We're also going to be talking to Tobias Elwood, who is chair of the Defence Select Committee, because a report has emerged today that basically we'd be absolutely knackered if Putin tried it on. So we're using outdated tanks and all of this. So we're going to talk about exactly how and why that has happened. We'll be going through all of your front pages as well, talking about the economic situation, and we're going to America as well, talking about Joe Biden with the co-founder of the National Tea Party, no less.
Sounds great, mate. Patrick Christie's with you until 1 p.m. You have been a fabulous audience. I have been Kevin O'Sullivan. This is Talk Radio. I will be back at 7 p.m. on Friday. Don't miss a second of me. Don't miss a second of Patrick. This is Talk Radio.
Online, on DAB+, and on your smart speaker.
It is the light at the end of the tunnel. But if we're going to get there, we have to tread very carefully.
Talk Radio.